Hey, happy Friday. Got another agent tip for you. This one is about should we make an amendment if we're going to close early? Like, what are the pros and cons of that? So, I'm going to show you. First of all, I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me so that maybe this will help you make that decision. So, years ago, I was told, hey, you don't need an amendment. It's closing on or before. So, let's say on or before April 1st, we were going to close. And I had, gotten cleared to close like a week early because Sarah's that good. But anyway, I got cleared to close a week early, called the seller or the listing agent rather, and said, hey, we've got clear to close early. Would your sellers like to move up the closing date? So he's like, yeah, that would be great. What day do you want to do it? And I'm like, okay. So, and I'm making up the date because I don't remember when this happened exactly. But I said, okay, March 25th. We'll do it March 25th. It's a Friday. It'll work out great for my buyers. And he said, okay, yes, let's do it. No amendment needed. Well, guess what happened? So March 25th comes along. We had closing scheduled. I go to the closing table. We get through all the paperwork. My buyers are super happy. They're like, wow, we get to move in early. This is great. And so they end up, going out and I think I walked out to go and meet them at the car or something. I think I had their present. I always do like a closing gift for my buyers. And the seller walked up to me, stuck her finger in my face, and said, how dare you do this to me? And I went, excuse me? She said, I found out in a day that you needed to move up closing because you wanted your commission quicker. And I'm like, what? No, like we talked about this quite a while before that. And I talked to your agent. And she goes, well, my agent didn't say anything until a day before. And he said that he had to move it up because that's what you were needing to do. And the buyers had to move in that next day. So we had 24 hours to pack up our stuff and get out. And I think that's completely rude. And I'm going to put a bad review on your page because you did this. And I'm like, I think you should probably talk to your agent because we discussed this back on whatever date that was. And of course, she didn't believe me because the agent forgot to talk to the seller. And because he forgot to talk to the seller, of course, he wasn't going to admit anything. He was already out the door because he saw what was happening and he took off. So I said, all right, from now on, no, we're going to do an amendment for any time we close early because I want to make sure that the seller is on board with this because I had no reason to move it up except that, yeah, it would help my buyers out. He thought it would help his seller out. And then he got busy and forgot to tell him until a day before. So don't let that ever happen to you. This is what you can do. There are two amendments that you can make. I'm going to share my screen to show this to you. But isn't that crazy? I mean, man, she was so hot. And of course, I don't remember whether she made a bad report or not, but if she did, I must have overcome it because I don't have any negative reviews. Oh, goodness. Okay, so I'm just going into Transaction Desk here into my test file. And there are two different amendments. There's just a plain amendment to agreement, and then there's an amendment to change closing possession date. Now, honestly, I would have probably just used this amendment to agreement, and this is how I would write it. Amendment number, whatever, the date, whenever, between so and so buyer and so seller, binding agreement date of, go back to the binding agreement date, and then the purchase and sale of that property would probably already be listed because I'd be in that, I'd have it in my wizard to know which property it is. But down here in the bulk of the amendment, I would just write buyer and seller agree to move closing up to March 25th, 2026. End of story. Just get them to sign it. You're done. Okay. That is the only thing that needs to be amended. Now, if possession is going to be a different story, well, then, you might have an occupancy agreement or something like that. But this is it. If you don't want to do that, and I'm going to leave here, go back to this. Whoa, goodness. I thought I was in transaction desk. Sorry. You might want to use the amendment to change the closing and possession date. The thing that changes in here is that it gets a little bit more complicated and technical because, and this is usually used to extend the date rather than to move it back. Okay. So again, all this stuff up here is going to be filled in. You need to put in the amendment number, the date, etc., and then just put the difference of the closing date. So if I said March 25th, which obviously was in the past, can't happen. Then, okay, the extension, the right to unilaterally extend the closing date for 8 days is provided for the right to extend closing date paragraph is hereby terminated or shall remain in full force and effect. Now, if you're moving the closing date out, okay, you might want to use this form to make sure that 8-day unilateral extension is noted shall remain in full force and effect. Now, if you are representing the buyer and you don't want to even mention this to the seller because you don't want to give them ideas of that they can make a change and bring it back to that this is terminated and you're still having to extend it because you might have a delay with the lender or a delay with title or something like that. You want to keep that unilateral extension available to you. So if you want to do that, you may not want to give the seller any ideas. So in that case, I would definitely use just an amendment to the agreement. Probably won't come up about the unilateral. That being said, also, if you are going to have to extend, do it with an amendment first, just a plain amendment, not the unilateral extension. If you need to use the unilateral 8-day extension, first of all, it's very specific as to how many times it can be used and who it may be used by and for what purpose. So I always like to amend until the seller's like, no, we're not amending it anymore. Well, guess what? Then we get the notice, the unilateral notice to extend, and there's nothing they can do about it. So that's why I'm saying, like, you may not want to use this form. But if for some reason you know already you're moving it up rather than out, you've got clear to close and everyone's in agreement, you don't need a unilateral because if you are, title's done, everything's ready, it's just waiting on you to get to the closing table and put a schedule in it. You can say this, it's right to you extend the closing date is hereby terminated. Possession, here again, through closing, make sure that that's covered, get the buyer and the seller to sign it. You sign it as well. It goes in an amendment. Make sure that goes to the closing attorney and you're good to go. So I hope that that will help you with if you have a buyer that's clear to close and you can move it up. Just make sure you do that amendment so that everyone's on board because I learned my lesson the hard way and I don't want you to. Okay. Have a great day. God bless and go out there and sell some houses.